All right, so what's up, everyone? This is the Coin Brief Podcast, episode 27. I am your host, Evan Faggart, and we've missed an episode or two. We might be like a week or two behind, and you've probably noticed by now that Sean isn't here. And we have Dustin O'Brien. So basically what happened is that nothing really huge or dramatic happens, just Sean has decided to pursue his own interests independently of CoinBrief, so we're going to be looking for a new host maybe in the future, or Dustin might stick around, so I guess it'd be worthwhile to introduce Dustin. So, Dustin, tell the viewers about yourself.
Yeah, I'm one of the co-founders of CoinBrief. I'm also the editor of CoinBrief, and I guess now I am co-host of the CoinBrief podcast. So that's
Yep,
me.
so we're going to keep doing it as usual. Well, as you can tell, we're doing a Google Hangout instead of the usual Skype call. That's because Sean was in charge of all the video recording and editing and everything, and I don't have the proper software to do the same thing yet, and I have to learn how to do it. So um, while we work on that, we're going to be using Hangouts. It's not the quality isn't as great as the Skype calls, but we're going to make do with what we have until I can figure everything out. So that's that. Like I said, there's not anything to it. It was just decided it was time to move on. So you want to get started on the news?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right. So obviously, the big story I have to talk about is Bitstamp. Um, they've been hacked and they've lost 19,000 bitcoins, which as of yesterday was around like 5.2 million. The price has gone up a little bit since then. But basically what happened, I think it started around January 4th, that was 2 days ago. They announced that they were having some problems with their hot wallets, and they halted withdrawals from the exchange, and Bitstamp warned users not to make any deposits because they had some kind of problems going on. And so people talked about that for a little while. They were talking about how they were having trouble making deposits and withdrawing money. And then yesterday morning, January 5th, they made an additional statement. And by the way, when this happened, they shut down their homepage and they just put a big message saying that we've temporarily suspended services because we're having problems, blah blah blah. And so they posted a new announcement on top of the original one saying we've been hacked, our hot wallets are compromised, and we've lost. They said less than 19,000, so everyone has just assumed that they've lost 19,000. I just rounded it up, and but they assured everyone that it was just a small fraction of their reserves, that most of them were in cold storage, and that they would reimburse everyone who has lost. If anyone has lost anything, that would be reimbursed fully. And they've suspended their service. So their price is unavailable. Like if you go to Bitcoin charts and click on Bitstamp for like, I guess it's 24 hours now, there's just a flat line. Kind of like when the bear well hit back in November. It kind of looks like that. And they're saying that they should be operational again in 24 hours because they're like making a duplicate of their servers or whatever in San Francisco. And so yeah, that's caused stirred up a lot of drama on the internet, on the subreddits. What do you think about the whole thing, Dustin?
I think this is going to be extremely interesting. It's horrible that they've been hacked. I mean, I hate to see that. That's the danger with exchanges, at least in their current form. They need to change a lot about how they handle their hot wallets, basically. to make this not happen in the future. But the fact that the Bitstamp, and I was reading it over here on another monitor, is saying that they are guaranteeing that money, that they will reimburse their customers for everything that was lost, is reassuring. So if they actually go through with that and they reimburse everything and they move forward, that would be, while it's not good that they got hacked, it would be a very reassuring thing to the community. And I mean, they certainly can. I don't know if Bitstamp has the kind of income to cover that much Bitcoin, but they've been successful enough that I think they could probably get investments if they needed to cover it. So
Yeah, I think. Well, that's a good point. We don't know for sure if they have that much money. They said it's only a small fraction of what they actually have, and they're also one of the biggest exchanges out there. But they could, even the biggest thing in Bitcoin is pretty small compared to everything else. Uh, but in my opinion, I think they handled it really well.
yeah.
They didn't try to act like nothing was happening. Pretty much as soon as it started happening, they shut down the website and let everybody know that they were having some problems. And then they were really honest about being hacked. They didn't try to hide that either. Um,
Yeah, I
and
was impressed with the transparency. It's been great.
yeah, and the CEO, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he was so apologetic about it. He took to Twitter and he was promising everyone that if they were having any problems, they would try to get it fixed. They would reimburse if their coins, if anyone lost anything. Um, but what's interesting though is the mainstream media's coverage of this because they're drawing a lot of parallels to Mt. Gox. Um, Mt. Gox Everyone should know who Mt. Gox was or what it was, but if you don't, it was the biggest Bitcoin exchange for a while up until 2014, and then there were rumors in late 2013 that they were insolvent and there was some shady things going on, and then in 2014, that's what happened. They ended up shutting down and losing. But they probably stole it, is what new reports are coming out suggesting that, and and it made the price crash. And the mainstream media, they're drawing parallels to that. They're saying it's the beginning of the year. It's a huge major exchange. They got hacked. Lots of coins were lost, and they're saying this combined with the price crash that happened over the weekend is just making 2015 out to be a really bad year for Bitcoin so far. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, there's really no comparison between Mt. Gox and Bitstamp. Like Mt. Gox is effectively like a massive bank collapsing due to fraud. That would be the comparison to traditional financial systems. What's happened with Bitstamp is more like a large bank having one of its branches robbed. It's going to hurt them, but they can recover and they've handled it well.
Yeah, um, I think the mainstream media, after Mount got shut down, they just kind of were like, well, that story's over. Let's stop following it now. And they just or have been completely oblivious to all the reports that have came out in recent months that have suggested that there's been fraud going on. Is actually an inside job. The Willie and Marcus bots that came out back in May of 2014. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that was actually one of the first articles I wrote on CoinBrief was about the Willie report, and Bitstamp is just totally the situation is totally different. They were completely honest about it. It was a completely legitimate exchange, and uh, they're actually they're just so much better than Mt. Gox. All the exchanges are because they've learned from Mt. Gox's mistakes. Like, I really don't think we're going to see another Mt. Gox unless somebody is just smart enough to completely fool everyone. Because now, in the Bitcoin community, every single new thing is a scam. You're guilty until proven innocent in the Bitcoin community now because of Mt. Gox. So,
Well, hey, let me interrupt you there. There was Moolah. That was not very long ago. and that was not on the same scale as Gox,
Yeah,
but something similar.
that was altcoins though, wasn't it?
They did focus on altcoins, but I mean, I believe they were planning on moving to USD, and they were at least at one point the largest volume-wise exchange of Bitcoin and altcoin exchanges. They passed Cryptsy at one point, and they were like double the volume, or MintPal was.
Yeah, well, I forgot about Moolah actually, but I mean, still, you can go on the Bitcoin subreddit, and every day there's a new scam accusation. Everybody is totally skeptical. It's becoming a lot harder to run a scam in the Bitcoin world, and it's gonna continue to get harder. And the hackers are gonna get smarter too, and it's just gonna be a constant arms race. Security is gonna get better on the exchanges. The hackers' tools will get better. Um, a lot of people. Well, this is actually another good question. Do you think that recurring hacking attacks like this warrants regulation from governments like BitLicense or anything else that would really clamp down on the exchanges? Do you think anything like that would prevent things like what happened with Bitstamp?
No, not really. Like, there's regulations would not help that. It would I mean, it would just put a whole bunch of requirements for, say security or for, whatever to try to protect the customers, but you can't you can't secure a system perfectly, and they're already doing the best they can with it. What I think we're going to see is insurance. And I know it's already happening with some exchanges that are hiring, that are finding insurance companies that are willing to, insure their customers' deposits. So that's what I think is going to happen. I think all the exchanges are going to move to having their customers' deposits just insured without the need for regulation to force that insurance.
Wait a
And
minute.
then,
So you mean to tell me that the free market private enterprise can provide deposit insurance and we don't need a tax-funded corporation to do that for our banks?
yeah, pretty much.
Oh, well, yeah, I totally agree 100%. I think the exchanges just through competition, they're getting better and better all the time. Like the exchanges that took over Mt. Gox, they were better. And each hacking attack, um, the exchanges are pretty much forced to increase their security efforts, or they're going to lose all their customers. Because like really, who's going to go back to an exchange that just got hacked and then they didn't do anything to improve their security?
Right.
So I th I think the free market is it just always leads to increased security and increased quality and things. It's not perfect. Like it's not going to be instantaneously like if there's a problem, it's just going to instantaneously be fixed because of the free market. I think a lot of anti-free market people think that that's what people like me argue, that we would just live in a perfect world of harmony and peace and nobody would ever get screwed over, nobody would ever get scammed. No, they totally would, but there's a definite incentive to constantly improve, constantly satisfy your customers, and we see that happening every time an exchange gets attacked. They're constantly improving and constantly trying to make sure that that attack won't happen again, and it's just a constant an ever progressing uh, chain of improvement and evolution, and that's what's so great about Bitcoin is we're just proving every single day that a free market can work.
Yeah, trial, error, and innovation. That's pretty much what happens. People try things, they have problems, they innovate, and that goes on and improves things and improve things. And
Yeah, and a
we'll
lot of the
continue doing this.
times, a lot of the times the regulation that's aimed at protecting the customers and preventing the attacks, like what happened at Bitstamp. Um, I mean, that might provide security. It probably does. I don't know. I don't have any like financial industry experience. I don't know how secure the regulated stuff is. I'm sure it's pretty safe, but it creates stagnation. And it makes it harder for new businesses to to start up because the cost of just the cost of getting permission to do business is higher.
Hmm.
And so it might give you some short-term protection, some immediate protection. It might make you feel really safe to have a bit license, where you know that it's government approved and we trust the government for some, god awful reason. I have no idea why. And but the protection that is implemented now by the government is going to be the same thing that's implemented 10 years from now. Whereas in the Bitcoin world, you know, a month ago is like 10 years ago in terms of developments and new technologies. And I think it's just going to keep progressing like that. Uh, as long as the market remains free, which it won't be much longer, in my opinion. But I think as long as it remains free, there's just going to be constant change and improvement.
I agree and disagree with you there. I do think it will remain free because of the nature of what Bitcoin is and what a decentralized currency is. I think that there will be regulations passed, and certain businesses are going to be required to stick to those, especially money transmitters, exchanges, whatever. Um, but I've also saw that people are working on fully decentralized exchanges. That's a revolutionary idea. If someone can make that truly work, then that who needs a centralized exchange if you have a decentralized one, and how are you going to enforce any sort of regulation on a decentralized exchange? Um, there was the name of there was a company that was doing that. I'll think of it later, but yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. Things will just continue to decentralize, and as you decentralize, it becomes harder and harder and harder for anyone to mess up because you take it out of the hands of people.
Yeah, definitely. I think there will always be an underground. There's always going to be your dark wallet and your open bazaar and your local bitcoins and whatever else. There's always going to be that. But um, I think the main vision now, what people really want to see is that we don't want to build an entirely new economy from the ground up. We want Bitcoin to take over the existing economy so it can just start out big. And to do that, we have to have existing businesses accept it, and they're not gonna take it seriously until they know the government's stance on it. So I
Sure.
think a huge part of Bitcoin's progression in the future is going to really rely heavily upon the kinds of regulation that gets passed and how much regulation gets passed. Because if it's a lot and it's super restrictive, then I think we're going to see a lot of stagnation in the Bitcoin economy. But if it's fairly light and there's not really much passed, which is best case scenario because there's going to be regulation passed, um, then I think it can continue to progress. But I think you're completely right. There's no way they're gonna stop Bitcoin. There's always gonna be the underground, and um, if it comes to it, it's always possible to build an economy from the ground up with Bitcoin. We already got started doing that with the darknet markets. That's how Bitcoin got started. People were buying and selling drugs on the deep web,
Yeah.
and Open Bazaar might get big, and so there will definitely over time be decentralized alternatives to the current economy, it'll be open to really big business. There'll be lots of big companies that could get started on something like Open Bazaar. But I think I don't think that's the goal for the majority of the Bitcoin community, though. I think they want to see Microsoft paying their employees in Bitcoin. They want to see Dell paying their employees in Bitcoin. They want to get paid in Bitcoin. They 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 don't want to build a new economy. They just want to take over the current one. And in my opinion, that's going to be totally dependent on the kinds of regulation that get passed.
Right, I completely agree with you there. Like, say, BitPay, for example, they're the payment processor that has been having the most success recently. They hosted a bowl game. They landed Microsoft. They've been growing incredibly fast, and They seem to not have had any mess ups. They've been really, really professional. That's not exactly what I was saying. When I was saying decentralized exchange, I wasn't referring to like a decentralized marketplace like Open Bazaar. I was actually talking about BitSquare. I just looked it up. Um, they're working on building an actual decentralized currency exchange, and don't even ask me how they're making that work.
Yeah.
It's really complicated, but they're trying to make an exchange that will basically hook people up and make it easy to transfer funds, not in a local Bitcoins way, more in a traditional exchange fashion, but keep it decentralized. Um, if they can succeed at what they're working on, then that will negate the need for any sort of centralized exchange.
Yeah, that's true, but my response to that would be, they may be really successful in building the decentralized exchange, but if there's no big companies that use Bitcoin, then is there really a point to even go on the exchange?
Oh, very true.
So
Yeah, the regulations are going to come, and hopefully they will be light enough that it won't cost companies millions of dollars to comply with it, and it will be something that will allow innovation without people needing to skirt around the law.
yeah,
Because that's how it'll work. It'll either be it's reasonable enough that people are willing to say, well, I don't want to do that, but I'm going to because I have to. Or it's going to be unreasonable, and those people are going to say, well, then I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to do something else with this and go around that anonymously or however they need to do it. I'll go to
yeah.
another country, whatever.
I think I've said this several times on previous shows. I think 2015 is going to be a really big year for regulation, and I think as much as I hate regulation, as much as I want like no rules at all. I'm just I'm a dirty anarchist. I want everything to burn to the ground. Um, it's it's going to happen. I think 2015 we're going to get the governments are going to take a lot more serious, solid approach to Bitcoin. They're really going to lay down what they think about it, and I think we're going to see um, more legislation regarding Bitcoin come out. And regardless of what I think about it or what you think about it or what anybody in the community thinks about it, it's regulatory clarity. I've said this a million times, but regulatory clarity, I think, is huge for getting mainstream businesses on board. Um, Patrick Byrne from Overstock, the only reason he accepted Bitcoin was that also a filthy libertarian and he hates the government too. That's why he accepted Bitcoin, and and but with regulatory clarity, I think big businesses are really gonna start taking to Bitcoin once they know what they can and can't do, what they're gonna get in trouble for, what they're not gonna get in trouble for, and it's not that the businesses are like they're like state worshippers or they're like slaves to the government or whatever. They're just trying to make money, and the reality of the world is that you have to do everything with the approval of the state, and I think that's the reason why a lot of businesses are skeptical is because it could be banned tomorrow. We don't know yet. But I think 2015 we're really going to start to see what governments think about Bitcoin, and even if it's really restrictive regulation or really light regulation, no matter what, I think it's going to bring a lot more businesses on board with Bitcoin.
Yeah, I do definitely agree with that. As once regulation is clarified, because as you said, it is inevitable because state and federal governments have already said that they're going to regulate it. They've already stated that. Just what those regulations are, that's the part that's unknown. So that's going to happen. That's not ideal, but you can't necessarily stop it either. But you are right. That will bring businesses in. That will make them feel more comfortable because they'll know the rules. Right now, they're not sure of the rules because the rules are. They've basically told everyone there are going to be rules, but you can't. You don't know what the rules are
Yeah,
yet.
yeah.
So yeah, you can go build your system, and then when the rules come out, it might negate half the things you're doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
but with like, with companies like Microsoft and Dell, like those are two of the biggest ones that have came in and are now getting into accepting Bitcoin. Dell really accepting it, and Microsoft is starting to dip its toes in the water with the digital content, as well as PayPal and whatever they're doing with it. They're supposedly working on integrating fully eventually.
Yeah, I was
That's going to be a driving force behind not only getting other businesses on board, but hopefully getting the regulations pushed through in a way that won't be too bad because they
right.
have a lot of power.
I was super excited about Microsoft accepting Bitcoin. I was really debating with myself over whether I was going to go PS4 or Xbox.
Mm.
Every Everybody's saying that as far as specs go, PS4 has just blown Xbox out of the water, but I can buy Xbox games with Bitcoin. So that's all it took for me. I've decided to go with Xbox, but
Yeah.
that's kind of that's off topic. But I guess since we're talking about regulation now, it's a pretty good segue for our next topic. Um, I read an article this morning that let me find it. Okay, here it is. The United States Treasury is next week. They're holding a meeting for the money services businesses community, and they're going to be discussing the state of financial access for MSBs, and they're going to the article says, quote unquote, the U.S. Treasury Department plans to spell out the government perspective on financial access for money services businesses. So apparently they're going to be either helping or hurting MSBs get access to financial services like banking. Probably going to be hurting them, but that's besides the point. The point of this article is that the Chamber of Digital Commerce they've applied to attend this meeting, and they're going to try to bring it to the Treasury's attention that lots of Bitcoin businesses have been they've been discriminated against by banks based on their affiliation with Bitcoin. They've suspended and shut down bank accounts, which what business is able to operate without a bank account, you know? So the CDC is they're putting together, they've put together a task force called the Financial Access Task Force, and they're putting together a presentation about the troubles Bitcoin businesses have faced in the past with banks shutting down their accounts and just not just being unwilling to work with them because they're a Bitcoin business. And that's pretty much the story. They've also started this initiative where they're going to be helping businesses become compliant with anti-money laundering and know your customer laws. So banks will see these companies as less of a risk. But I thought this was a pretty significant story. It's because it's a chance to get Bitcoin in front of a government that has lots of a significant amount of influence on the financial sector. I mean, do you think it's going to work? Do you think they're even going to be able to get in?
I think they'll get in. Whether or not they'll be able to really have any influence there, I don't know. But if the point of this meeting is basically to address the issue with MSBs and obtaining bank accounts, basically, that's not a problem that's just limited to Bitcoin. Like it is a problem that for Bitcoin, like based money transmitters, payment processors, because if they are both a money service business and they're working with Bitcoin, then it is almost impossible to find a bank that will work with you. And I know this personally because I worked with a payment processing company that works in Bitcoin. I worked for one for almost a year, and that was one of the biggest problems they had was finding, getting the licensing needed, finding banks to work with them. That was one of the big stopping blocks, that they worked and worked to finally get around and finally work out and make happen. And it was because that just, especially the big banks, were all just completely against it. They just wouldn't do it. They would not touch it. And the regulations on becoming an MSB yourself, applying for it, in order to do it for all 50 states, it takes years and millions of dollars. And then you're still not even sure if you're going to get approved. So it's like it's very, 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 very difficult, and it needs help.
Well, yeah. This meeting actually doesn't have anything to do with Bitcoin. It's just
Right.
other MSBs, and the CDC is just trying to take advantage of it to bring this issue in front of the Treasury. But why are banks being so reluctant to work with Bitcoin companies? Is it because they hate Bitcoin, or is it just because it's because is it because there's no regulation? They don't know what the future of Bitcoin is going to be.
I think it's a combination of things. Like I think some of the banks I think are afraid of it. They're afraid that it will replace them, and they don't see if Bitcoin really, like say perfect scenario that everyone's talked about in the Bitcoin community for years, where Bitcoin just completely takes over and blows up and becomes like the international currency of all currencies. Which would be a really cool thing to happen, but not something I see happening anytime in the near future. I do expect it to get bigger. But if that were to happen, then it would put them in a situation where they basically don't have a job anymore. There are a lot of smart banks too, though, that see the advantages of Bitcoin, that see the efficiency, and are looking for ways to work with it and to use it. And to basically redefine what they do. So I think that's one of the big things. And then on the other side of it, I think one of the biggest problems is lack of understanding. Like so many of the banks, big and small, even the executive level people, just truly don't even understand what Bitcoin is. They don't grasp it. They can't wrap their mind around, or they haven't put enough time into it to wrap their mind around what Bitcoin is, how it works, and even look into the fact that it is more efficient than anything they do.
Well, I guess it's a lot like the internet. I'm obviously too young to remember a time before the internet, but I'm sure there were companies who were like, internet, why do I need a website? I can just like put an ad in the newspaper, people come to my store, and then 10, 15 years later, those companies that didn't want to get a website, they ended up, I'm sure there were companies like that who ended up going out of business because just their online competition completely blew them out of the water. And
Right.
if Bitcoin takes off like a lot of people think it's going to, like I hope it's going to, I can see that happening to a lot of banks. And I think the smart banks are gonna they should work on integrating Bitcoin, or at least drawing up a plan for just in case Bitcoin replaces them, and they can just transition into a different business. Like for example, I wrote an article a few weeks ago on CoinBrief about banking in a Bitcoin economy, and even though Bitcoin completely really removes the need for a bank account at all to store money, there's always going to be a demand for credit, and that's going to be uh, where the banks go. They're just going to focus solely on credit and lending, consumer credit and investment and investing and lending to entrepreneurs and business owners. And I think the smart banks are going to catch on to that and try to take advantage of it so they don't die.
Right. Well, I mean, the financial service industry is called an industry for a reason. It's banking is not just storing money. That is what banking was built on. But banking was built on, give us your money, we'll put it somewhere safe, and we'll hold it for you. That's not really what banks are anymore. And yeah, I think replacing that part of what they do would not necessarily kill them unless they don't prepare for it. And I mean, I'm sure that all of the big ones are preparing for it in one way or another. Just some are preparing for it in a way that will most likely involve them fighting tooth and nail, lobbying, doing whatever they can to keep it from ever, going forward, while others are preparing for ways to work with it and use it as a springboard to propel themselves forward. And I think that if Bitcoin is successful, or in my opinion, it doesn't have to be Bitcoin, any digital currency, Bitcoin could be the first iteration of something that, is built basically on top of the idea of Bitcoin. It could really, the banks that jump on it, the companies that jump on it early and really, really use it, could use that to surpass their bigger competitors.
Well, let me ask you a question that's kind of related, but kind of not. It's kind of off topic. Do you think digital currency or blockchain-based currencies like Bitcoin, do you think in the future they're going to be actual currencies that people use in day-to-day activities, or is it just going to be like a means of transferring dollars or yen between banks?
I think it's going to be. I mean, I don't know how many currencies there are going to be. There are too many altcoins right now. I don't think there need to be anywhere near as many as there are. I don't know if it'll end up being one or if it'll be a handful or what in the end. But I think it's going to be just mainly the currency of the internet or the currency of fast transactions. I think there will be the traditional currencies alongside those. It'll be I don't foresee necessarily the world that people expect where Bitcoin is like the universal currency. At least not soon. Eventually, maybe. Um,
Well, yeah, that's what I was asking. Do you think it'll ever get to that point? Is it
oh well.
possible?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, technology is advancing at a rate that's inevitable. I mean, it doesn't even have to be blockchain based. A digital currency that is based on some sort of computer algorithm is inevitable because basically every service in the world that is not, even things that are physical, are eventually going to be replaced by some sort of algorithm that does it automatically.
Yeah, I think so too, but I hope it's Bitcoin because Bitcoin's really cool. Um, but
Yeah.
let's move on to the next topic. Another pretty cool story came out this morning, actually. Amagi Metals, for anyone who doesn't know, Amagi Metals, they sell gold and silver and a few other precious metals, and they got famous for accepting Bitcoin, and they accept a few altcoins as well. And a few months ago, they announced that they would completely stop accepting the dollar by the end of 2016, and starting in 2017, you could only buy precious metals from them using Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency. And this morning, they uh, they released an announcement. It was a blog post on their website that they were going to be paying a portion of every employee's salary in Bitcoin from now on. Um, it, the CEO, Stephen, is his name Stephen? Scott. It's Scott McCaskill. He he has said that his entire team is on board with it. They've all agreed to it, and they're all excited about it. And he himself is actually committing $40,000 of his annual salary to Bitcoin. Um, it's a pretty big commitment that Amagi Metals is making. I I think I hope this is what I hope we see a lot more of in 2015.
Yeah, I do too. I like that Overstock keeps a percentage of, everything they're paid in Bitcoin, and I believe they pay some of their employees with Bitcoin, like the ones that opt into it. I'm very happy to see Amagi Metals doing that now. I think that's going to become a trend. Either companies going to just paying their employees in Bitcoin, or just at least giving their employees the option to have Bitcoin as all of their pay or part of it.
right? Well, I forgot to mention that they're using Bitwage, which is the only company that does payroll conversions to Bitcoin that I know of right now. But yeah, but they're using Bitwage to pay a portion of every employee's salary in Bitcoin. And Bitwage is really interesting, I think, because employers can just sign up with this service and they can enter in their payroll or however they have it set up, and they can pay a percentage of their employees' salaries and or wages if they're hourly workers in Bitcoin. It can be like 1% to 100%, and I think it's pretty awesome. They've also started they've rolled out another service that's in beta stage right now where individuals can do it. If you work for a company that uh, they can be totally anti-Bitcoin, they can hope that it's banned. But if you work for this company, you can just go through the individual service and commit a certain percentage of your paycheck every month or week or every 2 weeks to Bitcoin. And I think that's a pretty cool service.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. I hadn't heard about that one before. And maybe I'll start using that for CoinBrief to pay you guys.
Um,
I mean, I just pay you directly now, but
yeah,
have something to actually keep up with a little better.
yeah. I I think well, I'm not sure, but I hope Bitwage is something that takes off in 2015. Because really, I have no idea why, but the past like month, the only thing anyone has been talking about has been price volatility. Like that, like all of a sudden that has become the biggest thing in Bitcoin is price volatility. Like, oh, nobody in the mainstream will ever adopt Bitcoin as long as the price is volatile. Um, but I think I think actually paying salaries and wages in Bitcoin is uh, a really great way to help cut down on price volatility because if if a bunch of companies pay their employees in Bitcoin and they go through Bitwage, obviously Bitwage has to buy a bunch of Bitcoin so they can send out those payments, and that's going to increase the demand for Bitcoin, which is going to obviously make the price go up, but it's going to strengthen the network effect of Bitcoin too. As the price goes up, as a result of companies paying their salaries in Bitcoin, creating this demand, more people are going to get in on it. And also, it's going to, I think, all things being equal, it'll create a chain reaction where you have like a retailer company, they pay all their employees in Bitcoin, and they're constantly having to like work with a third party like Bitwage, which I think might charge like some kind of processing fee or subscription service or something, and they're constantly having to like move money around, transfer it from bank to bank or however it works, and unless the U.S. government changes or the IRS changes their position on taxes, the taxes are just it's so hard to pay taxes in Bitcoin because it's just so complicated. And they're just going to realize, well, I'm paying all my employees in Bitcoin. That's going to be a huge cost cut if I can just get my supplier to accept Bitcoin for my products, and I can pay my utilities in Bitcoin. I can pay my rent in Bitcoin, and then it's just going to move up the production chain, and at, then before you know it, the whole economy is going to be using Bitcoin. And at that point, volatility will be completely that'll be a thing of the past.
Right. Yeah, that is what's needed really. It needs to be the entire supply chain. It needs to start somewhere. Some supply chain somewhere needs to start going from manufacturing to wholesale to retail to the customer, with Bitcoin being used the entire way. And you and I talked about this before. I think the best chance we have for that right now is probably Dell, because Dell is a retailer that also, you know, is very, very large, handles a lot of their own wholesaling and manufacturing, or at least works very closely with other companies to do it. They have the potential to actually make that happen. Whether or not they're interested in doing that is another story, but I kind of hope that they do.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. Microsoft too. Also, they said
Yeah.
that depending on the regulations that come out in 2015 and the following years, they're going to be looking into expanding their use of Bitcoin, and they do all kinds of behind the scenes things. I'm not a tech guy, so I can't explain anything they do, but they provide a lot of software for like the back ends of businesses, like running servers and things like that, and that's a huge area of potential too, where Bitcoin could be integrated there, and it's just another stage higher in the production chain.
Right. Yeah, Microsoft's involved in way, way more things than people think. They've got their hooks in every area of tech. And I mean, it helps that Bill Gates is a big fan of Bitcoin. Even if he's not the CEO anymore and running it, his support, I think, is what's going to push them to increase their adoption and move forward with it.
And going back to just employees getting their wages, I I think I think that can also serve as kind of like a tipping point, I guess you could say, to get people to get into Bitcoin, because right now, as much as the Bitcoin community hates listening to criticism, it's a really valid point that there's just not much reason for most people to use Bitcoin, because they've already got their credit cards and debit cards that are really convenient. They can just get their paycheck direct deposited into their bank. So so why am I gonna buy Bitcoin? I'm gonna spend money to buy Bitcoin from an exchange that I can use at a store where all I have to do is just type in my credit card information and do it way faster.
Right.
Now, they can just set a percentage of their paycheck to, it can be 1%, 1% every month of their paycheck gets paid in Bitcoin, and they can forget about it. They don't have to worry about it, and they can just have Bitcoin and experiment with it when they want to. And it's just a huge increase in just convenience, and that's all people want, because humans are lazy.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Um, yeah, I think to get the full effect of what Bitcoin could do for paying employees, and right now a percentage-based one is probably the best for most people. Um, Obviously we pay all, like I pay everyone at CoinBrief solely in Bitcoin, but that's an agreement made beforehand. Everyone here is involved in Bitcoin, so that's normal. Um, but most people aren't going to want that. Once things have evolved a little bit more, though, what I foresee in the future, what I think would be really, really cool is, right now people, yeah, sure, they have their paycheck deposited at the end of every week or every 2 weeks, you know, um, direct deposited, and then it clears, and they can use their debit card. But how cool would it be to every day after you've worked, you just automatically have a Bitcoin transaction come in? You're paid every day. You never, there is no delay, and you can instantly send that anywhere with no waiting. Use a credit card. Yeah, it seems instant, but it's not really. Um, it's truly instant and cheap and efficient, and the efficiency I think will help when it and eventually.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people on Reddit talking about how microtransactions like that are going to be the future of of paying people. Like you could you get paid every single day for the work you do, or you could get paid by the hour, by the minute.
Hmm.
Um, or your boss could be like, hey, go do this, and when you complete it, he can scan your QR code and give you like 10 cents for completing that task or whatever. And also with things like Ethereum that are being developed, I remember reading this little passage from something Vitalik Buterin said, and he was like, imagine where you wake up and check your phone and you see $17 was taken from your Ethereum wallet based on the smart contract you drew up with your landlord to pay $17 a day in rent. Uh, you like you go take a cab to work and you just like swipe your wave your phone in front of an NFC thing and it's just instant payment for the cab fare. It's just things like that. That would be truly amazing if something like that happened.
Yeah, and that's basically possible today. It just needs to be more widely accepted. I mean, that could happen. That's just stuff that could happen today. The stuff that's being developed is you could take it much farther than that.
Are smart contracts developed enough to be able to automatically do like you get like paid by the like hourly every single hour you get something deposited into your wallet, or are they that developed yet?
I don't think anyone's developed that one specifically, but my understanding of counterparties porting of Ethereum, that should be possible if a programmer wrote the program to run that contract.
Well, I think that would be pretty crazy if something like that took off. I don't see it happening anytime soon though, because like I said, everyone is so attached to their credit card right now.
Yeah. Well, it's credit cards have kind of. I mean, they were a step in the right direction from the old. I mean, they were needed for global transactions. That they were born out of necessity, basically. And at this point, they're so ingrained, it is going to be difficult to switch to something else that offers basically the same thing in most people's mind. I can pay instantly with a credit card. Well, no, you can't really pay instantly, but it seems like that to most people, so they're willing to do that, and they don't feel the cost of using credit and debit cards. That 2 to 3% that every transaction costs when you use a credit or a debit card, which is insane amounts of money. The customer never directly sees that. The vast majority of people never see that because they're not a merchant. That's why it's set up to be on the merchants to pay that. Because when you have a smaller group of people who are the ones that are being hit with that are having to deal with that are experiencing the negatives of how credit and debit cards work, they don't have the really influence to change it. That's why merchants are the ones that are jumping on board. You see big merchants now
Right.
jumping on board with Bitcoin because they save tons of money. It increases their profit margins in a big way.
Yeah, with Bitcoin, all they have to pay is the miner fee, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
And that's
yeah,
like 4 cents for an average transaction.
yeah, something like that. Sometimes for larger transactions, people will put the fee a little bit higher to make sure it goes through quickly. But yeah, I mean, you could technically send just about anything for a very, very, very small amount.
Yeah, well, let's move on to the next topic. Another little story came out today or yesterday. I don't know. The article I have pulled up is from today. Volta Satoshi. It's a Canadian cryptocurrency exchange. I guess it's kind of popular. Um, they've announced that they're going to be shutting down next month on February 5th is when they're planning to shut down. But there's no like problems or anything. They're not insolvent. Like nobody hacked them or anything. The founders just they just want to move on to a different project that's totally unrelated to cryptocurrency, and they're working on this thing called TurboFlix, and it lets Netflix users watch videos that are geographically restricted. Like if you live in Germany or something, you try to watch a video somewhere and it's just not available for whatever reason. This apparently is, they're providing a way to get around that, and that's what they're going to be doing. Um, they have stopped accepting new deposits, and they have uh, told their users that they need to submit withdrawal requests by the end of February 5th if they don't want to lose their money. And so that's one less Bitcoin exchange in the world. Actually, it's kind of funny because just a few days ago, CoinDesk published an article. I didn't read it, but the title of it is why some Bitcoin exchanges might shut down in 2015. And then a couple days later, we have one shutting down. I thought that was kind of funny.
Right. Yeah, I've heard about Volta Satoshi, many times. Looked into it a little bit. I mean, it was a legitimate exchange. It was ran by, pretty straightforward people. I don't think it ever got that large, though. I mean, I don't know what happened. I don't know if they just didn't advertise enough, or if it was just, what? I mean, I know it was successful. It was running, but I guess they just are done with it.
Yep, they decided they wanted to do something different. I've heard of Volta Satoshi before, like I've seen the name before. I didn't really know what it was though until I, read the news story today. But it was big enough news to get to the top of the Bitcoin subreddit. So
Yeah, yeah, they've been around for quite a while. Like I said, it's weird with them because also I don't know a whole lot about Volta Satoshi. I've never used them. I never really. I don't think like I said, I don't think they just advertise very much. I don't think they really push their brand.
yeah,
But regardless, I think a lot. I also think that a lot of exchanges are going to start to go away this year. There's only so much room.
what do you think are gonna be the main ones, like the Coinbase or Circle or?
Well, I don't like to speculate on that kind of thing. I don't. I like, Coinbase is kind of one of those like in between things where it's kind of an exchange and it's kind of a payment processor and it's kind of an online wallet. I don't even know if you could consider them exactly just an exchange because they handle everything internally. There's no order books. There's no whatever. And I have some concerns about Coinbase, but it's not related to their exchange side. And I'd rather not go into it right now.
Okay. Oh, that's fine.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think most of the smaller ones are going to start disappearing. The ones that have been around for a bit and have never really gotten any serious traction, have never been able to really bring in a lot of customers, are going to start to go away. I think a lot of the altcoin exchanges, especially, are going to start to evaporate. Like altcoin exchanges that have had some success, and some of the legitimate ones that have been around that just have never really grown that large are going to disappear. Many already have. Some disappeared with fraud. Some disappeared legitimately, like just gave all the money out and left. But I don't know. I think eventually it'll get down to just a handful.
Well, what do you think about altcoins? What do you think they're going to do in 2015? A lot of people say that because of side chains, altcoins are just going to die.
Maybe.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but it could happen.
Maybe. I mean, I would say if sidechains achieve, if Blockstream creates sidechains in a way that achieves everything they're setting out to do, and it's like it comes out and it's exactly what they said, Like it allows for this like flawless transition of assets between these chains with protection to keep one chain from messing up another and be able to move it back and forth. Um, yeah, I don't really see why there would be a need for altcoins as we know them today. Altcoins would be there. They could just transition into a side chain though. Um, so like, you know, one of my favorite altcoins is Redcoin. I like Redcoin because it was one of the early like tipping currencies, and I like that. Kind of like ChangeTip's doing now, but it was built to be that. I like it. So if side chains are built correctly, then Redcoin could basically just make a side chain that is Redcoin, and then you could just easily transition between Bitcoin and Redcoin at will, depending on what you wanted to do. It kind of going back to the idea, from my understanding of sidechains, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier with the decentralized exchange in a way. It is not going to USD, obviously, but between digital currencies and digital assets and contracts and stuff like that, it provides a decentralized way to go between those.
I think the problem a lot of people have with altcoins have a really bad reputation for being scams.
Yeah,
Uh, Whether or not that's true, who knows? But I'm sure a lot of them have been scams. But
the
the
majority.
problem, the problem with altcoins, I think they serve a legitimate purpose as being able to find out um, what what people are looking for on how Bitcoin could get better. And the way I see it as it's just from an economic point of view, the most profitable companies, generally provide the best product, or they advertise the best, they say the best things. So like the most profitable coins are generally the ones that have the best features, or are advertised as having the best features. And so the way I see it is if there's a bunch of people putting a whole lot of money into a certain altcoin, then that would be a great feature to implement into Bitcoin if possible. But of course, with altcoins, that opens up the opportunity for a lot of scams, because the only way to fund the development of an altcoin is to either do it out of pocket or have an ICO where people, where they have a pre-sale and people buy, um, chunks of the currency. But now with side chains, they could just experiment. They don't have to really get funding for anything. They can just experiment and play with it, and you know, show the project to the community and be like, is this a good idea? Is this not a good idea?
Right.
So I think it preserves what I believe to be the main function of altcoins, which is to figure out what the most useful features would be that could be ported into Bitcoin, and then it preserves that function while eliminating fraud, because it really cuts down on the funding requirements for building an altcoin.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right, and that is the point of an altcoin. An altcoin is about evolution. I mean, I've said this to people before. When you see all these hundreds of altcoins that have been created, what we're basically seeing is the evolution of digital currency. We're seeing survival of the fittest, like evolution. Like, 99% of those altcoins are going to end in flames. 99% probably already have, like out of all the ones that have been created. Some might be dragging along, but really they're dead. Um, and I don't know what the number is up to now in terms of total altcoins created. I know that at one point it was, 400 or 500 different altcoins were out there, and that was some time ago. So the number now is way, way, way higher. I mean, there was a program developed that would let you just go like with a few clicks create your own altcoin. Um, you could just set the block size and the speed, and just do you want script or SHA or X11? What do you want? Here's an altcoin for you. Yeah, so I agree that the point of them basically is the experimentation. See what works, see what doesn't work. And but where I disagree is I don't think necessarily that all the things that work with altcoins should or could be integrated directly into Bitcoin. And that's what I like about sidechains, because sidechains answers a question I've had about how altcoin, like the advantages of some altcoins, would ever be successfully integrated with Bitcoin. Like, going back to Redcoin, which, like I said, was one that I've always liked. The way it was able to be a tipping currency was that there's a huge supply of them, and it has a really fast block time, and it's just really cheap, and it has the transaction fees are so small that it can handle microtransactions really well. Bitcoin doesn't really handle microtransactions well. That's why ChangeTip's needed. Like, that's why ChangeTip exists, is because Bitcoin itself is not very good with microtransactions. But with sidechains, you could have some Redcoin or something like Redcoin on a sidechain with Bitcoin, which, if you read the sidechain white paper, you can really effectively consider any sidechain to be Bitcoin itself too, because it's all interchangeable, and in Bitcoin it becomes the parent chain of all these others. So you change your Bitcoin over to the Redcoin chain, and you can use them there, and then you can transfer them back, and you get the benefits of the Redcoin chain when you're on it. Like, you get that, the faster speed, and you get the lower transaction costs, and you get all of that, whenever you want it. And then when you're ready to go back and you want Bitcoin's security and you want Bitcoin's features and you want, what it has, you go back the other direction. Or you go another level, in. If there's another coin or another asset, it doesn't even have to be a currency, that has interesting ideas that's blockchain based. You can move into that and always retain the option of going back to where you started with Bitcoin.
Right, and the sidechains would essentially totally decentralize things like Bitcoin tipping, for instance, because one of the biggest criticisms that people have of ChangeTip is that it's a centralized company, and so there's just all this money sitting in a wallet that's controlled by a single company. And with sidechains, from how I understand it, is that it would just operate off the blockchain. You just transfer Bitcoin onto a sidechain, and you'd get that sidechain's tokens, and then it's just another decentralized thing.
Right.
That you can tip people with.
Right. Yeah. So you have the people work on this side chain over here, the tipping one, be it, like I said, Redcoin or some new one or some mixture of a whole bunch of current altcoins that currently exist coming together to make this meta tipping coin. Those developers could work on building wallets that do decentralized tipping without the need for a centralized one, without needing to modify Bitcoin in any way to make that work, because it's not feasible to make that work on Bitcoin. So I really, really, really hope that Blockstream is able to fully pull it off. And I mean, they got $20-something million in funding, so they've got the cash to do it. Hopefully they can pull it all together.
Okay, so, since we're on the topic of tipping, let's go ahead and do one last topic from this week and then wrap the show up. So ChangeTip is rolling out a new feature. When was this? I don't know when this was posted. Okay, it was posted yesterday. This is on the ChangeTip blog. It's the one-time tip link, and it allows people to send Bitcoin tips to people who don't have social media accounts, because right now, ChangeTip, you have to have, in order to send and receive tips, you have to have either a Twitter, a YouTube, or a Reddit account, and I think they're working on Facebook now. But with this, you can tip through email, and it also says text message too. I didn't see this. You can send somebody a tip over text message, but the big thing is email and chat messages like Skype. You just send them a link, and they click the link, and it says you've received a tip. And well, I guess that's what it is. It's like you've received a tip. Click here to create a wallet and redeem your money, and that it's just a new feature ChangeTip is rolling out, and it seems pretty cool. It's because ChangeTip has done. There's people have some problems with ChangeTip, but it can't be denied that they've brought a huge level of awareness in the past few months for Bitcoin, and but it's been limited to social media. So this is an opportunity to expand that capacity to raise awareness for Bitcoin, possibly, to older people who aren't involved in social media, like, your parents or grandparents maybe who are just now learning how to use email.
Yeah. Yeah, here's a little bit of Bitcoin, and then include directions on how to use it to buy something they would like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is great. I mean, my criticism of ChangeTip is that they're centralized. Nothing against anyone that works with ChangeTip or their developers, because I think the work they're doing is great. I really do, and I support them, and I think it's awesome. But I'm a huge supporter of decentralizing absolutely anything that can be decentralized. If it can be decentralized, I think it should be.
Yeah.
Um,
I think decentralization is the best way to go, but at the same time, I really don't understand all the hate that's being sent towards ChangeTip for being centralized, because it's not like they're scamming anybody or pulling the wool over anyone's eyes. They're just a private company and they're offering a service, and people are willingly, voluntarily putting their money into ChangeTip, knowing that it's a centralized company, and there's anything that's centralized has a risk of failing, and you could lose your money. But people like the service enough to take that risk, and they're doing it voluntarily. So yeah, of course, whenever there's opportunity to make a decentralized alternative, I think people should always jump on that. But I just really don't understand all the hate ChangeTip is getting. Like somebody wrote an article a couple weeks ago titled "ChangeTip Must Die," and they were talking about how it was just the worst, most dangerous thing ever, and the guy couldn't believe that anybody actually used it. And I don't agree with that side of the criticism.
right. I do understand that side of the criticism because I do and I don't, I guess. Because, like I said, I have a lot of respect for ChangeTip and what they're doing. And like you said, they increased a lot of awareness. I think that they should have went for trying to develop a decentralized way of doing it rather than focusing on doing a centralized way. Because I mean, even though it couldn't be done necessarily with Bitcoin as is, with smart contracts and with side chains being developed and all of that, they could have been working on something like that, trying to bring that kind of tipping into it. That's the kind of tipping that's needed. That's why, like I said, I liked Redcoin or Dogecoin. We know which Dogecoin is ridiculous and based on a meme, but they've got a lot of tipping stuff in, and they're great with microtransactions. That's decentralized tipping is the realm of altcoins at the moment. Altcoins destroy Bitcoin in that respect. Because of the way they're built. And again, like I said, hopefully side chains will remedy that. I mean, the altcoins would still be there doing it in a side chain, but with Bitcoin being the parent chain, that would make them still Bitcoin in another form, basically.
Right.
And that would be awesome. Get all the advantages of being able to have a million different altcoins without the risk and without the disadvantages of having everything split in so many directions.
Yeah, I think I agree. Tipping is I I'm pretty sure it's inevitable that tipping is going to go that route at some point. But I remember a few months ago, people were like, "How are we gonna tip people with the Reddit tip bot like they're doing with Dogecoin. How are we going to do it? It's not working because it's just too expensive to do microtransactions with Bitcoin. But that we have a solution now, and everyone hates it apparently, or a lot of people do. But I think for
Yeah.
the time being, it was a really great idea, and people wanted Bitcoin tipping. Now they
Mhm.
have Bitcoin tipping. And in the meantime, we can work on decentralized method of Bitcoin tipping.
Right. Yeah, you're right. And like I said, all the respect in the world of the change tip people, they are doing a good job. Unless they do something shady, or they get
That,
hacked, in which case I will not
yep.
like them
But
anymore.
that's true for anyone in the Bitcoin community. They always have to be
Right.
real careful because everyone thinks you're a scam artist in the Bitcoin world, but that's a good
Right.
thing.
Yeah. That is the only thing that worries me with ChangeTip. I don't really think they're a scam like artists. I don't believe that at all. I'm more worried about them being hacked. Just like I worry about all the exchanges being hacked. That's why I'd like decentralized everything as much as possible
Yeah.
because it makes hacking much, much more difficult. At that point, you have to hack individuals.
Yeah. Well, that pretty much wraps up the show. We covered all our topics we wanted to cover. So, hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to come back next week. Dustin might be making a return appearance, or he might have a new host. Who knows? But in the meantime, you can follow us on Twitter. You can find me at Evan Faggart, and I don't know if Dustin has a personal Twitter, but you can follow CoinBrief at CoinBrief, and subscribe. Always subscribe, and hope you come back next week.
Yeah, it was fun. And thank you.